Good morning. Oh, let me make sure that I fix that. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It is, I'm so excited about this. I didn't even get myself mentally ready here. It is August 18th, 2024. I'm Eric Murphy. This is Skeptic Generation, and we need to talk. Hey, everybody. Okay, so, pardon me while I get myself ready. I'm excited. I Before we dive into calls and everything like that, I kind of wanted to give all of you an update over the last few years, getting SKEPGEN ready. It has been a number of little things as far as gear, getting this piece instead of that piece. It has all led up to today, and I'm really excited about it. I had gotten a camera that can stream out in 4K. But I didn't have the internet, and I got the technical stuff fixed to fix the connection. And this is the first episode of Skeptic Generation that's going to be in 4K. I was nervous about getting it done and doing it right. And so I wound up streaming on Twitch for a couple of days last week. It was so much fun, you guys. I was playing Dead by Daylight, if anybody's played that before, with my Huntress and a bunch of old friends. People who used to come and hang out when I was Twitch streaming, during the height of lockdown, came in, and it was just a really, really wonderful feeling. I was so happy to see everybody, and I kind of want to do that again. I did it to test whether or not, the technology was there. I was able to stream out in 4K, 60 frames per second, which was incredible, which makes me feel comfortable doing this show the way that it's coming across now. So I hope that it looks good. I hope it sounds good. Yeah, so that said, I love it. I do kind of want to try something out with you. I have lots of clips from this show that still need to be put out. I have back episodes of the podcast that are waiting to be released. And I thought that it might be fun for me to do that with you guys on a stream. Not today, but I'm thinking about trying it tomorrow. And if that works out, then I would be happy to kind of make that a thing. So if you do want to check me out on Twitch, I believe my Twitch name is Eric the Heathen. I believe that's it. So yeah, feel free to check me out there. Me playing video games, and I may just wind up doing some editing and showing people a little more behind the scenes of what goes on into making SKEPGEN happen. That said, thank you all for like the support. I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled, and I hope everything's coming across well. All right, so live in 4K. That's the name of the episode. Well, I want to take your calls. I would love to talk about philosophy, what your beliefs are, what maybe issues that you are having that you want to discuss, or maybe get some advice in, as far as dealing with religious folks or in philosophy itself. Today is a great day to do it. Before I hop into our first call, I would love to get some more calls on the line. Let's have this be just an incredible day. Here's the phone number, 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. It is toll free, as always. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN to call in online. Again, toll free. Our call screener is waiting to talk to you, and I would love to have these conversations. That said, let's move on and get to our first caller. We have Sean in the UK. Sean, you're live.
Hello again. Yeah, I called last week.
Hello. Yeah. Okay.
I'm here to call about a different topic, though.
Okay.
This time, infinity.
What about infinity?
Well, I called in about over a year ago now, actually, about the same topic. And I don't think I did very well. There's a big talking point in the atheist community about infinity, whether or not it's a quantity, or how to make sense of it, because there's lots of misunderstandings about it. So first thing I should say, So infinity is just defined as something that is not finite.
Okay.
So in itself, it's not a quantity.
No,
But
it's a concept.
Quantities that are infinite.
Right.
Yeah. So the last time we spoke about this, we sort of settled on infinity being sometimes quantitative. And after thinking about that for a while, I'm not sure I can settle on that anymore.
I don't know if I don't know if I accept that anymore. If that was my view, because I think infinity is a quality, right?
Well, it depends on the type of infinity, because there are lots of different kinds.
How so?
So there are cardinal numbers, there are ordinal numbers, there are
Right.
different kinds of surreal numbers,
Right.
hyperreal numbers. Yeah, I could go on for a while.
Yeah. But that
so,
wouldn't that wouldn't make infinity less of a concept. Like let me give you an example. If I were to say coldness, right? Something can be cold, and we can talk about what coldness is. And if you were to point out to physical, tangible things that are cold, if you brought me a snowball and said, this is a snowball, it is cold, it is not, the snowball itself is not like a physical instantiation of the concept of coldness. It just has that quality. The quality of coldness is still a quality. It's not necessarily instantiated in a physical thing as much as it is a descriptor, right? So would you, I kind of would love to tease that apart. I think infinite would be a descriptor there, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, but wouldn't also two-ness or threeness also be a similar thing to that?
Say that one more time.
Wouldn't two-ness or threeness be a similar thing to that?
Yeah.
It's a property of the set after all.
Absolutely. So infinity would be a property.
Okay. Well, let me say that there are infinite numbers nonetheless.
Sure.
So if you want to avoid referencing finiteness when defining infinity, in infinite numbers at least, you can say that at least with cardinal numbers, the cardinality kappa is going to be infinite if kappa squared is kappa. Kappa is not 0 and kappa is not 1.
Okay.
Because when you square a lot of infinite numbers, they end up as themselves.
So I'm sorry. I know that you're wanting to. I want to give this the time because it's very fun. Although I know that I do lose people after a little bit, so just after reading the comments last time, I want to make sure that I'm not letting my own personal joy at this take up too much. That said, it sounds like kappa is a set, right? And you're viewing that set as finite because it's a set. There are brackets in it, but there's an infinite number of numbers in that set, right?
Yeah. Okay. The smallest kind of infinity is the countable infinite, which is the infinity of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, ... So successively adding 1 to 0.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a smaller infinity than 2 to the power of LF naught.
Right. I highly recommend for people who want to get see some visuals around this. There's a YouTube channel called Numberphile, Numberphile, that I absolutely love watching. That gets into this in some really, really creative ways. Have you seen Numberphile, Sean?
I have. I'm a huge fan.
I figured you would. All right.
There's one by Asaf Karajila. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He made the Numberphile video Absolute Infinity. And Asaf, I can't call him by his first name, Karajila, he's an expert in set theory. So he really knows his stuff. So if you want an accessible video, watch the Absolute Infinity video by Numberphile.
Absolutely.
Another good one on the different types of infinity is by heart. How many different kinds of infinity are there? Something like that. That's what the title sounds like.
Yeah, I've seen both of those. Yeah.
By heart. Yeah.
No, I definitely recommend that. And on top of that, I would recommend Matt Parker as a content creator as well. Matt Parker does. He's a stand-up comedian, mathematician, and he does stand-up maths. And he's friggin' hilarious for people who don't think that mathematics can be something fun or interesting. Definitely give him a try because he can change your mind for sure. Sean, I don't think we're going to find anywhere we're going to disagree here.
Okay.
I mean, it's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
We could talk about it some more, or we could leave it there. I'm happy with either. I think I've done better this time round than I did last time round.
I think so too. I think what's important is, working with that concept internally, you can go, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. But practicing it such that you can express it clearly so that people who are listening can understand it, takes a different level of mastery that is difficult and sometimes can be easy to get caught up on. I think you did a really good job.
Thank you. There's a saying, when you teach, you learn twice.
Yep.
And it's definitely the case because in researching things to say during this call, I relearned some things that I haven't seen in a while. So, yeah.
Yeah, I gotta get myself out of teacher mode sometimes. I went to dinner with some old friends this last week, people who I haven't seen in a decade, and I met a friend's wife who is just the sweetest person. I want to get to know her. She's wonderful. She's a Christian, and she asked me if I've heard of Kierkegaard. And I immediately turned and, Kierkegaard. And I turned to the rest of my friends and I'm just like, well, Kierkegaard is, for you guys who, probably don't know. And they're like, Eric, we know what Kierkegaard is. I just immediately dove into that mode and I got embarrassed. But, Sean, thank you for calling in. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I know that you had said in the chat beforehand that you had some real life stuff that needed doing, and you still took the time to call in. So I hope whatever you got going works out well, and I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, see ya.
Take care. All right. Yeah, that feels much cleaner and more understandable than the last time, for sure. For sure. All right. It looks like I have another caller on the line. I'm really excited about that. I saw a student, Dr. Ben, is in here. Long time no see. Hope you're doing well. Feel free to call in. I miss you. It's been a long time. But first, I do want to take this next caller. If anybody else does want to call in, I've got only this one caller on the line so far. Sometimes it's feast or famine with call-in shows. Sometimes I've got 1 million people and sometimes I'm hurting for callers. So before I take this, let me put the phone number up there, 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. All right. And look at that. There's a cat behind me. I didn't even notice. Hey, little one. Yeah. All right, let's talk to Michael in New York. Michael, you're live on the show.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Good, man. You're looking great in 4K. The hair is stunning. The cat's involved. This is a great upgrade.
Yeah, thank you. Having curly hair can be really, really difficult. It makes green screens impossible. And it never comes out. It always looks like this weird, blurry mess. But having that higher video fidelity, you can actually see my weird mop of hair. So I'm glad.
Yeah, it's great, man.
Yeah.
Remember that Family Guy episode where they went to 4K and everyone thought the anchors looked horrible all of a sudden?
No, I haven't. Oh, gosh, I haven't watched Family Guy since season 3. But that was a long time ago. But what did you want to talk about?
Well, I'm working in a relatively young area of engineering where there's still a lot of just kind of feel it out and just do what makes sense to you. And one of the things that I've tried to really push for in my own work is to say, well, if we think about this more and we get more data and we're a little more critical here, some of these choices that might seem like 50-50 dealer's choice, there may actually be an option that's objectively better than the other one, and we can get there if we put a little more thought into it. And that's been very successful for me thus far.
Yeah.
I think the problem I have is that I tend to approach everything in life the same way, and I'm often told by my loved ones that I'm a bit rigid. So I'm wondering, is there maybe any meat on that bone to say that, most of the decisions we have to make in life, in our interpersonal decisions, emotional decisions, moral decisions, is it true that if we sort of really ponder this and really dig into it, there is usually an objectively better option, or is that just wishful thinking from my semi-autistic brain?
No, I think that so the problem is we don't have the benefit of being able to stop time. If
Right.
we had the time, if we could stop time for any given scenario and could potentially list out every possibility, then I think there are objectively the best, choices for sure. I think that as humans, we tend to give each other a lot more room to fuck up because we don't have that ability to stop time. We understand that, if you're making a decision in the intensity of a moment, that it may not be the best decision you could have made or one that you would have made, if you had more time to think about it. So, no, I agree. I guess what I'm kind of curious about is I thought that you were going to say that that skepticism was making you too rigid in a way that, that rigidity would work against you at work. So I'm kind of surprised that you're kind of bringing it in this perspective. I don't know. Is there any meat on the bone left to kind of talk about this concept? Like,
Yeah, no,
what do you have?
I mean, that's an interesting comment that you make. I definitely think that skepticism can lead to rigidity, but I don't think it has to. I mean, there's a lot of room for creativity in what I'm doing professionally and trying to come up with new approaches and new ways of thinking about things. I think the anchor back to skepticism, though, is it should be based on data or facts or something objective. And, when in doubt, I found that following the truth has been almost always the move. I mean, there's one situation I could think of, with the benefit of hindsight, where speaking the truth was not the strategically correct move, but I didn't know that at the time, like you said, but generally speaking, following, operating within the boundary conditions of whatever the data lays out, I think has usually been successful. I'm not sure that would make me rigid. I think it makes me rational.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And rational is the correct term for sure. Yeah. No, I think we're in agreement. So in the description it says, is it too rigid to approach life or morals in the same way that you're approaching engineering? And I feel like I don't know if we've fully addressed that, but I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around the exact question here.
Okay, yeah. Let me see if I can give you an example.
Yeah.
There's, I think, particularly in the United States, we've really built up this idea of like individualism and pluralism and like, everyone can vote for whoever they want. That doesn't mean that both choices are equally valid or equally moral or equally good for everybody. And I think sometimes we confuse this almost enshrined level of freedom and autonomy in our culture with the fact that those choices don't have any effects on other people, or that, one choice might have a objectively better outcome. And I don't think that part of the conversation happens. I think we just get to, well, it's my freedom to do as I want. And then there doesn't seem to always be a conversation about, but let's talk about the consequences of making these decisions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe one option is clearly better, whether or not it's your decision to make. I don't think people are debating that. But what I am saying is this doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah. And like you have the freedom to emotionally hurt the people around you. But why would you? And is that a good decision? Just because you have that freedom doesn't mean it's a good choice. I agree. I agree. How does that like reflect back on the engineering background though?
Well, that's an environment where, that super rational skeptic mindset has brought me a lot of success, but people aren't algorithms. And I've learned not to think about people as transfer functions or circuits or filters, because we can't always predict the output for a given input with a person, but we can with a circuit. And so when I don't allow for the humanity of people, that's when my judgment leads me in a direction that is often not what I expected or fruitful, or I don't get the outcome that I wanted. And so, does this rational model break down when dealing with interpersonal interactions? Because people aren't always rational.
Oh, absolutely. No, I would take a schematic over a person in that case, for sure. For sure. At least you can like bug test a thing. There's a problem. You can figure out where it is.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my tastes can change. I'm sitting here drinking a iced coffee that I made before the show. It's delicious, and I can tell you, I really, really want iced coffee. But once I'm satiated, I've had enough. I'm not going to want any more. Which means that you can, if you create this kind of axiom of Eric loves iced coffee, you bring it to me, and I don't want any more. Then what? It doesn't. People change, and they're constantly fickle, and their motivations are changing. I might want a thing, but it could be against my best interests to do whatever that thing is. I really like moving here to Portland. Do you know the number of like hipster cafes, microbreweries, and fancy cocktails there is? It's crazy. I thought that I had that in Austin, Texas. Here in Portland, it's even more so. It's just everywhere. And if you were to say, Eric, I really want to take you to get fancy cocktails, I might want that thing, but I might still say no. Because motivations have so many different layers that, people are so much more complex.
Right.
And entirely irrational. So, definitely not wise to take that approach to people.
Yeah, so you have to maybe temper that a little bit, But I think that's the part that I struggle with. Not to be a meme or anything, but like that unpredictable. I work a lot with a concept of a transfer function, which just says if here's a system, if we control the input to the system, we know what's going to come out. It's not a really challenging concept from a circuit standpoint, but people don't behave that way. And so it's that unknown element of where I thought this was going to be the result, but that person did or said something that I didn't expect. And those are the things that really put me on the back foot, I guess.
I mean, that makes sense. It would for me too. But then again, I don't know. I feel like
I will say this though.
Yeah.
To sort of counter my own point. Most of the time when I've been faced with somebody in my life doing something completely out of character, that I just could not understand why they would do something, I was missing some sort of context or some sort of information that they had, or bad information they thought they had. And so you sort of Sherlock Holmes it and say, well, what set of circumstances would explain this person's choice to do this thing? And not always, but often that sort of decodes the thing for me, is that figure out what they were functioning off of and what they were playing off of and what was going on in their world and what information they thought they had. And all of a sudden you go, okay, now I understand why you would do that. Like, I don't maybe approve of the fact that you did that thing, but I get how you got there. And so maybe we're not completely irrational.
No, and also we need to understand that not everything is situationally I'll give you one other example. I know that this may be a tangent, but what you got me thinking about is people that I admire. How do I interact with someone that I admire, right? Somebody who has a set of skills or a quality to them that I wish that I could have too. Maybe there's a stick-to-itiveness. Maybe there's a ability to save money, or whatever the case may be. The more that I want to get to know that person, it might not be the scenario that they're in. It might not be their work that's causing them to be a hard worker. Right. It might be the axiom, something deeper, this axiom around which they're building their life and their identity that is informing the choice that they're making. And if we can get past the situational stuff, right? If you can get past the individual scenarios that might be motivating somebody's actions and get to the axioms upon which they're making those choices, then you might be able to better look at your own axioms and maybe make some adjustments,
Yeah, no, for sure. I could think of a situation in my life where I watched somebody that, up until that point was a friend do something that was incredibly harmful. And when we finally decoded why they did what they did, the answer was they were sexist. That was what it came down to, is they just had a bias, and all the facts in the world couldn't vouch for this decision that they made because they felt that because this person was a woman, they couldn't handle it themselves. That's effectively what it came down to, sexism, plain and simple.
And there's an axiom there, yeah.
Yeah, it explained what happened, but it sucks because you're like, I didn't, first of all, that's not in my mental rubric of why I would do a thing. You know what I mean? So I didn't get to that cause of action on my own. But also, I think it sucks because to just go, well, they're just doing that because they're sexist. Even though that's true, it feels like a shitty judgment to place onto somebody.
Yeah. No, I agree. And there are less emotionally charged axioms as well. I had
that's a strong example.
Well, I had two friends who grew up very different. One grew up very poor, and one grew up very wealthy. And the one who grew up very wealthy needed to borrow some money, and so the friend who grew up very poor lent them that money. The person who then got this loan, who grew up wealthy, they really didn't see any time limit or need or concern around paying them back, and it wound up destroying that friendship. Because the axioms that they have around the way that they treat money is so deeply ingrained, it didn't matter, what their current circumstances was. It was about, a deeper relationship they had. But I think we're probably going a little too far down this path. But Michael, I appreciate it. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, that was useful. Sometimes I just want a gut check, make sure I'm not going down some goofy, avenue with something. So.
Oh, do not use me as a reliable source. I'm not. I'm some asshole on the internet, and please do everything with the understanding that I take no responsibility. Well, I should. Ethically, I should. But I also should put a warning out there.
I wouldn't put responsibility on you, but it's sort of like, hey, if there's an obvious flaw in this, thing that I'm saying, you are a good enough critical thinker to point it out. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for calling in.
For sure. Absolutely.
All right. Have a good one.
Take care.
All right. Oh, good. We got another caller in time. Today's going to be a full episode. I love it. Just so you know, everybody, I'm not going to be doing an episode next week. Next week, SKEPGEN is taking the weekend off. I'm going to be out of town. I love you guys, and I'll be happy to come back, but I'm just not going to be able to be at a computer doing this. So if you did want to call in, this is the week before I talk to Summer. Let me get the phone number up there one more time, because I want this to be a full episode. 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Let's talk to Summer. Summer, hey! Hey!
I'm so happy to talk to you again.
I'm happy to talk to you too. You've been going through some rough shit the last few times you called, talking about just the philosophy of death and Camus and talking about whether or not it's worth punching your own ticket and all of that. It's been a rough couple of weeks. How are you holding up?
Yeah, so I recently got evicted from my apartment, and that brought me, I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I just landed my dream apartment.
Hey!
Yeah, I mean, it is unbelievable, Eric. I mean, it is the dream of dream apartments. And so I'm calling about Carl Gustav Jung's Synchronicity. And all of these and why I believe it's happening to me. And I'm calling because I want you to talk me out of it. Because it seems like the only way that I grow is by challenging my beliefs. I've kind of learned that.
I love that. I've got to tell you, just in private, when V and I are discussing things, and there's some really good idea that pops up, V and I will both just just try our best to destroy it. And it's out of love. It's this is a good idea. Let's attack it and see if it holds up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of I feel like a lot of people take it personally when, for people like us, it's something that helps you decide on whether or not it's safe to put your weight on it. You're testing it.
Right.
So you want to talk about synchronicity. So let's get the basics of synchronicity out of the way. What is it, and what part of it are you kind of like wanting to see if it holds?
Sure. So, so unus munus, as is above, so is below, as is above.
Right.
Right. And so I'm struggling with that. These things are happening in my life for a reason, and there's all these things going on that I believe that are being connected. And the same way that, like, that scarab gold beetle came to Carl Jung's session when he was working with that young woman, and the exploding bookcase, that happened to him. I believe the same things are happening to me, and it's making me crazy because it's challenging my beliefs. And because, when I was being raised Catholic and being part of the whole, religion, like, I fall into these beliefs, and then I think that they're correct. And then, eventually I end up finding out I wasn't correct about it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So, like, what is something that, like, do you think that, like, what, from a skeptic's point of view, what is that saying to you? Like the whole double slit experiment, right? Like, are we being watched? And then when we're not being watched, is our unconscious guiding our life? I don't know.
Well, the way I think about it is that you have your kind of conscious mind and you have your lizard brain. You can consciously say, I'm going to choose not to get the triple bypass burger, even though I really want, right? Your lizard brain really wants it because, fat and all of that, it lights up all these different chemical parts of your brain, and it tastes delicious. And this higher level, kind of this thinking goes, well, but I also want to not get a triple bypass. And so, you kind of have those, conscious and unconscious pieces. So I definitely agree that that's a thing. As far as like outside being watched, I think that we do enough to ourselves. To be honest, I probably watch, I know I watch myself more than I watch anybody else, and I'm more critical of myself than I am of anyone else.
Right.
Really basic interactions, I'll run through my mind and go, oh, that's the cringiest thing ever, and nobody else will ever remember it. Right? I'll say or do something really embarrassing, and it's the thing that I beat myself up over, but I would never, ever, ever beat someone else up over it because it's stupid. But I'm overly critical of myself. And so the idea that I would need an outside perspective looking in on me to make any kind of judgment, shit, it's bad enough as it is. So, when you talk about like synchronicity, what that describes is paranormal, right? It's this idea that that there are outside minds without bodies, that there are actions that are taken without any tangible things used to put them in motion, right? You have to have a hand if
Right.
you're going to pick something up with your hand. But because of that, I just, a mind cannot exist without a brain. It just can't, because your mind is a product of a brain, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the motor that makes the thing go, and going is the mind. So without it, and I mean, dead people have brains, so obviously not even all brains, can create minds, just living functional ones. And so because of that, I have to temper those kind of supernatural ideas, because I just, there are no minds without brains. But I feel like there's a deeper piece here, and I would love to address it. And that
Okay.
is that, can I ask you a potentially offensive question? I don't mean it to be offensive, I promise. But
I don't worry. Yeah, I can't be offended. Go ahead.
okay. Is there a part of you that feels like it needs to be bigger than yourself, or part of some bigger plan, or part of some bigger mind, in order to be important to you?
Oh, good question. I've been struggling with that question, Eric. I don't know. Like, why do you ask that?
Because I think that, like, you just landed your dream apartment. That's fucking incredible. And the circumstances around it sounds like it was really, really shitty. Getting evicted has gotta feel truly terrible. And so, like, something good happened in your life, and you have every right to celebrate it. But to then take that attribution of that good thing and put it on something else that's not you.
Yeah,
Me
I get where you're going. Like, but it seems
Yeah.
like all these bad things are happening to me, and then all these good things are happening because of the bad thing.
Yeah. And that's like, that's life. That's the ups and downs of it. And you should celebrate when things are doing well. I'm just wondering, like, here's an example, Summer. Just with my brain chemistry, when I was growing up, I was that kid who always tested really, really well. I, got really, really high in grades and marks in school, never in homework, which always brought my grade down, but, like, always tested really, really well. But whenever I got a test back, I didn't get the dopamine hit that I saw everybody else get. So I would take that grade to my parents, or to, whoever, because they would get excited for me, and I'd be excited because I knew that they were excited about it, which made it feel important to me. I needed to externalize something in order to feel it joyfully. And I know that's a quirk of my brain. And so I think I'm putting that on you, and that's not fair to you. And so that's why I'm asking, so that I can better understand it, is if you're experiencing something great, but in order to really feel that, you need to externalize it in order to get that. I'm again, it's projection, and it's not fair. That's why I'm wanting to work with it.
Yeah, but no, when you said that, that's exactly what I had felt like. I got excellent grades in college, and all that, but it just seems like, I don't know, things have gotten more intense, and then, I asked my parents for help because, my whole family passed away from cancer and COVID 3 years ago.
Oh, jeez.
And yeah, and so, it seems like when I ask them for help, like, this help is coming, but I can't explain it. Like when Carl Jung talks about, like, a person dying, and then at the same time a bird flew into his window. What was it? The cause of the bird flying into the window that caused the person to die, or it's I don't know. My brain is about to break, Eric. That's why I'm calling you.
Yeah,
I want to figure this out. I want to know what is going on.
I think honestly it's much simpler. I I think that what is it? Heinlein's razor is that don't attribute to malice what
Is it
can be.
Arkham's razor?
No, Heinlein's razor. It's don't attribute to malice what could be explained by incompetence. Have you heard that?
Oh, I never heard of that. No.
No, it really, really helped me. This idea that, I thought somebody really didn't like me and was doing something to spite me. And it turns out they had no idea about me. They weren't thinking about me and they were being inconsiderate. And it hurt me anyway, right? I wanted to attribute it to malice, but it was due to incompetence. And I kind of take that and I kind of put that other places as well. I don't want to attribute to conspiracy or to some grand plan, some grand design, this. I don't want to do that when it can just as easily be explained by coincidence and life. I think that we humans are pattern-seeking machines. It's what we do all day, every day. It's how our brains work. It's why we're, it's why we are the way we are. We evolved this way. And finding patterns when you're looking for them, you're going to find them. It happens every time. And if you're looking for patterns, things are going to feel eerie and weird and wild. And that's because it's something that your brain can do. But it's not.
Am I looking for patterns or am I looking for explanations of why I think these things are happening?
Well, so why do you think there's a why?
Huh.
Because the why that you're implying, I think, here is that there's a plan, a purpose, a design. And maybe we're the ones who are making the purpose and the design. Maybe it's not your higher brain. Maybe it's your lizard brain. Maybe, you are putting yourself in the direction that has led you to the ups and downs that you're experiencing. But it doesn't need to be some great hidden hand. It doesn't need to be some spark of divinity or of, supernatural, when it could just as easily be us. So you don't need all those extra pieces.
Right. But then how do you explain the double slit experiment?
What about the double slit experiment? Right? When you have photons that are being shot through this double slit, and depending on whether or not they're observed, they're acting as particles or as waves, right?
Right.
Cool. That means that we're still learning about photons. I've had people call in and say that the double slit experiment defies the laws of logic, right? A thing is what it is and isn't what it isn't.
Right.
But the fact is, we're just learning more about photons. It's an unknown and we're figuring it out. And I think that when we do have a clear understanding of it, just like everything else, it'll have its own definition and we'll be able to use that. But
I love that answer.
Yeah. Good. It's we're still figuring it out, but I don't know, or pointing to something that's confusing is a really, really bad example of, it should never be used as the example of a thing, right?
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. It try to look for more clearly understood, less vague examples for things.
I always learn so much by calling you.
Yay! I forget what the Latin term is for it, but the fallacy is called the appeal to mystery.
Yes.
Yeah, a mystery is not evidence of a thing. Anything.
Yeah.
Good, pro, for or against. It's just I don't know. So summer, I fucking love that things are going well for you. And I think that you deserve credit in everything that you did. All of the parts that you played in order to make it happen. I hope I hope this is a good uptick on things getting better moving forward. And regardless, I definitely want to reinforce this, that like things are better because you were here long enough to see them get better.
Thank you. Yeah.
And they're going to get better, and then they're going to get worse, and then they're going to get better. But it's worth it. And I'm really happy that you're here to call.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You've given me a lot to think about, because I called in to talk to Matt Dillahunty about pantheism, and Aaron Ross is like the greatest thing to me, to like get me to not go down that route. You know?
Yeah.
And so it's just, you guys have been just such a support, and
Good.
I don't know, I'm figuring this all out, and I really appreciate you and your show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for calling in. And Arn, just so you know, total sweetheart.
Yeah, he is.
Just absolute sweetheart. Adore the guy. Anyway, Summer, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye. In my personal life, I have a friend, longest friend in my life. I've known them since middle school, who's also kind of dealing with, finding meaning in coincidence. And I don't think I'm doing a good enough job of being able to discuss it. And so getting the chance to talk to somebody else about it feels good. But I'm definitely excited to have that conversation many more times, because I really, really want to be able to have that discussion with, people I care about in my personal life, longtime friends and family, So I'm happy that call came in. I'm glad Summer's doing well. Okay. Let's talk to, really? Someone called in with the name Plague. Plague in California. You're live.
Can you hear me fine?
You sound really good. Are you calling using like an internet connection?
Yeah, it's hardwired.
You sound so good. What did you want to talk about?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of reality and our conception of it and stuff.
that feels like the name of the episode.
Yeah.
Like it's the theme. Okay, what about it?
I would just say I've read a lot of books and done a lot of thinking in general that is kind of like made me like think about reality a lot more, to where it's like, you have like, the more naturalistic mindset where it's like, oh yeah, we would want to wait for more scientific evidence for this or whatever else.
Well, I feel like we do that a lot just in general. I mean, I don't have kids. I have a cat. But if I wanted someone to babysit my cat, I would want to make sure that like I knew them and trusted them. I would want to make sure there's good evidence behind them being able to watch my cat, right? And it's the same for people with kids, right? Like you want some more information that's always useful. You don't want to invest your life savings in something that's unknown. You want to see some history there in order to make an informed decision, especially when it's important.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I just think certain lines of evidence are dismissed too often, just because like we don't have the exact like scientific instrumentation or tools to like study it better.
I can kind of see that. Like, okay, so I know in the skeptic space, right, in scientific space. Well, okay, so in the skeptic space, we talk about evidence as something that is affirmative of, one thing over another, one conclusion over another. But the fact is, everything is evidence, right? I'm holding up my glasses cleaning cloth in my hand right now. I can say this is evidence of the supernatural, right? Or I could say that it is evidence of 50 people in my house. We evaluate this evidence and go, this is bad evidence, right? What connection does this glasses cleaning cloth have towards 50 people in my house, or the supernatural, or whatever? And so because of that, using the term evidence, we get to be a little bit more discerning. We look for relevance and whether or not things are, tangibly connected in order to give it any credence. But like the germ theory of disease, right? We didn't have the technology to see these things, and it was written off. But it wasn't written off for methodological reasons, right? It wasn't written off. It was written off for a lot of years due to hubris and due to pride. Doctors not wanting to think that they were responsible.
The story about this is really funny. Like, I heard that some doctors that were like more into like hermeticism or whatever else, they actually did start to wash their hands, and after a while, like they stopped again for whatever reason. Like, it was really weird reading about that.
Interesting. Yeah. So I people who are watching, I apologize. Plague is calling in to talk about demon possession. And what we're talking about is kind of setting the stage for talking about demon possession. So we're skirting around, and I realize the audience has no idea what we're on about.
Okay, I see what you mean.
So talk to me. What's up?
Okay. Do you watch Myth Vision podcast?
With Derek?
I think so.
I've seen some episodes. I'm embarrassed because Eric is a person that I met. He actually interviewed me for Myth Vision years ago. And from what I've seen, he has been one of the sweetest, most genuinely like full of wonder at the world people. So while I haven't seen his podcast, my experiences with him would make me want to recommend him like crazy.
Yeah, I don't frequently watch him, but there was one episode recently that kind of caught my attention that was in my feed, and it was about true stories of demon possession.
I you know what? I know GM Skeptic did a series of videos recently about demon possession as well. So what about it?
So basically, he interviews like a priest who's like actually been in the field itself. Like he's been in like the rooms while the exorcising was actually happening, and just the shit that he talks about is absolutely crazy. Like if you were to watch it, you would like start to realize that. Well, I mean, I guess it's an anecdote, right? I mean, it's somebody's perception of what happened, but like, I don't know, the way that he was talking about it, it just seemed like, what he was talking about was real,
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there are a couple of things here. The first is kind of the way people's minds work, and the second is cultural. Let me get into, I guess, the cultural first, and then people's minds. Feel free to jump in at any point, right? As far as cultural is concerned, I think that it's very telling that, scenarios of demon possession, the possessed person acts very socially contextual, to where they are. Different cultures have things like possession or spirits or that kind of thing. And they act specifically like that they've been taught to. An example is, you ever been to a Pentecostal church?
Yeah.
You ever see people speaking in tongues?
Yeah.
So
In fact, I can actually do it myself.
yeah, those people are they're getting really wrapped up in it. There's a well-studied phenomena of, you know, when an entire group is part of a thing, that it kind of sweeps people into it. But when those people are quote unquote speaking in tongues, the explanation that's given is they're being possessed by an angel, right? By some Holy Spirit that is speaking in either a angelic language, or in some ancient Hebrew dialect or something like that. And what you have usually is a whole bunch of white people who are pretending to speak a Middle Eastern language that they don't understand, and so they're making just a bunch of noises.
So I would actually disagree with some of that. I know that might be the case for some people, but it is kind of like a mental state that you get into, and it's weird. It's like you're accessing like a different part of your brain.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing there. What I am saying though is that they're not speaking a real language.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
And what they're doing is contextual, right? You have this person maybe in Illinois who has never been to the Middle East, has never had, deep conversations with somebody in any kind of, Middle Eastern dialects, but they have an idea of what it sounds like. And so they make noises that sound like that. And you're going to find that people who speak in tongues that have different ideas of what an angelic language is, all of a sudden speak in that different way, because it's just people. Ultimately, it's just people. At the kind of bigger piece of it is, if anybody in the comments knows what I'm talking about, there was a documentary crew that went to Africa to document and film demonic possessions and exorcisms, right? And this film crew was in this tiny village where one night they see this exorcism, and they're talking about it on the plane afterwards. Even after the event the next morning, they're like, "Oh my gosh, did you see it?" They lifted off the ground, and they were speaking in this demonic voice, and lights and things changed, and there was all these different things that they were describing were really intense and really wild sounding. But when they went back to the tape, none of that happened. And what happened was, you have a bunch of people who collaboratively created a fish story. It just got bigger and bigger every time it got retold. Something was added and people go, "Oh, I think I remember that." And all of a sudden, because of the way our memories work, we just add that in. We change it. And it becomes more fantastic.
Yeah, could I jump in for a second?
Of course.
Okay, so like I understand like where you're coming from, and I just would, it's sometimes hard for me to articulate things, sorry, but I would just recommend, like, even if I'm not able to accurately, say what I'm trying to convey, I would still highly recommend just watching the interview, because it hits different. Like, he does address some of those concerns, and it's just like some of the things are just like something that your perception wouldn't be able to lie about. Like, for instance...
Wait, I gotta put a flag on the play here. I never said they were lying.
Okay, I know what you mean.
Okay.
I mean, like, how your brain, could falsely attribute things, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't trust my memories 100%. Hell, studies about what we visually take in, right? We only take in a tiny amount of data. And our brains fill in the rest. And what our brains are filling in could be wrong, and it leads to false memories. And over time we work with those memories and they change. I don't think that it's lying, and I think that everyone should be wary of fantastical memories because we're not good at it. We're not good at perfectly recalling things.
Yeah.
So what about the experience would lead it to be perfectly recalled? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm like more, or so like one of the examples he pulled up,
Mhm.
I can't think of a different one, but was like basically supernatural strength, and I've also read about this too.
Sure.
Where the person essentially like needs like actual like several people to hold them down.
Okay.
Like they are just out of their minds, like to the point where it's like, they can be like, a smaller person, sometimes like just a short woman or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like they will actually need several people to hold them down.
Absolutely. I don't think that's supernatural. Hell, I've seen a video of a toddler pick up a bookcase to save their infant brother. There are plenty of examples of mothers lifting cars to get the child out from underneath. When your body is pumping adrenaline, I think that we are capable of more power than we realize. And I think part of it is that we limit ourselves so that we don't hurt ourselves, right? But if you don't care if you're going to be hurt or not, you can do some amazing things. There are examples of people breaking handcuffs, and breaking out of cars by, kicking out windows and things like that. Usually they're on drugs, but ultimately what it is a disregard of their own well-being, right? They probably broke their wrists or they broke their ankles or whatever, right? They put power enough into a thing that they hurt themselves, right? They're willing to do that. I think we're capable of a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. We're just limited to not wanting to do something that's going to hurt ourselves, but that doesn't feel supernatural to me.
Okay. There's one more thing that I remember that they were talking about, and it was essentially the priest was talking about how the person, like, he describes it as the demon is talking through the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like their cadence of voice completely changes, other things like that. And what the person can sometimes say, well, they'll say something about somebody in the room that the person themselves would never know. And it would be like something that would be, almost secret to the person that the demon is talking to. And like that they were doing like at home by themselves.
I think that we're capable of perceiving a lot more than we realize. And I've definitely heard that before. But when it comes down to looking at the examples, there are two answers that I've seen every time. One of them is, how did you know that this person was having trouble with their spouse? There's no way they could have known that, but they work together. You see that person come in every day. If they've been coming in more tired and irritable or something like that, you can assume something bad is happening at home, right? Like we don't attribute enough that, people can be observant. You can definitely pick those things up.
Yeah, but only to like, I would say
only to a certain extent, right? Like there's another answer.
Level.
The other answer is I don't know. There are plenty of times where somebody has known something that, how the fuck did they know that? Totally understood. But just like when Summer called, appealing to a mystery, right? A mystery is not evidence of anything. A mystery is a mystery, right? And I don't know is I don't know. But I don't think that a mystery is evidence of the supernatural or of demons. Because when is I don't know good evidence?
I have a hard time understanding that, I guess.
Sure. Well, like, when is I don't know good evidence?
So I'm not necessarily saying that I don't know is good evidence. It's more of like I guess like if we're talking about more scientific lines of reasoning, you can see how it doesn't hold up at all, right? But
well, not even science. Like, I understand replicability is important, and the scientific method is really, really important. But even if we take out replicability, I feel like if you put a lot of stock into it, in the same way that I talked about, right, needing, wanting to make sure that the babysitter for my cat's not some deranged maniac, like, some evidence that's actually positive evidence is important. Evidence that's not ambiguous, evidence that's not I don't know, right? I don't want I don't know as a good reason to invest my life savings. I don't, and because of that, like, when we're talking about things like possession and spirits and things like that, right? If we can, I'm not saying that we need to catch one in a bottle. I'm saying that if we had enough of a description that we can go, this is a demon possession, this is angel possession, or this is alien, possession. If you're a Scientologist, here are the differences. So here's how we can, determine, what this possession is and its qualities. It's a type of, the category relies on ambiguity and on unknowns, and I just don't think that's good enough.
Yeah, it's just hard for, even if a being like that did exist, like, just our terms of perception and the way that we can measure it is very limited.
Well, and I don't want you to think that I'm, motivated to say that it's not there. I would love evidence. And when I debated David Wood at a university in Georgia, I had an audience question that it said, what would it take to convince you that God exists? And my answer was a piece of evidence, a real positive piece of evidence. And that's because people, consistently brought me mysteries. You can't explain it. Well, you can't either. So why are you using it as evidence?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I don't have much more to say about demons.
No worries. I
would say.
Oh, go ahead.
I would. If you have any time, it would be cool. Maybe you could check it out. And I might be able to call back and we can talk a little more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Are you on Discord?
Yeah.
I'm going to do an after show on the SKEPGEN Discord. The link is in the description for this video. Why don't you follow the link and catch me in Discord and shoot me the stuff. I have a really crazy week this week. I'm going to be, flying out of Portland. So if it's like a lot, I may not be able to do it. But if it's something that I can look over at the airport or whatever, cool.
It's 30 minutes, so I don't know. What do you think about
that? I will give it a shot. I will try, okay?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
All right. Hey, Plague, keep questioning, explore it. But hold those conclusions that they're saying, right? These things that they're pointing out to, they're pointing to as evidence of possession or demons or anything like that. Hold them to a good standard,
Yeah.
Demand good reasons and good explanations. You deserve it. We all do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Plague, thank you for calling in.
Yeah. Good talking with you, Ethan.
Good talking to you too. All right. Again, I feel like one of the differences with this show and other shows is I'm not interested in a quick dunk to say, well, we're not dumb enough to believe that thing. Because that's not how you learn. I think Plague is, and Sunny earlier, right? These people are genuinely questioning, they're wondering, and it's about making sure that, they have good tools. They're calling into this show because they're like, hey, you know what? Here's a good approach to understanding the world. I would like access to these tools. I'd like to interact with this idea, bounce it off against somebody who's maybe a little more skeptical, a little more rational, in that sphere. It's important to focus on helping people develop those tools. I'm really, really glad that people like Plague can call in, and I really do hope that he challenges those things even more. I'm not saying he doesn't. Anyway, let's move on and talk to. Oh my gosh, I've got so many good calls. I'm really, really excited about this. You know what? Before I move on, if you are watching this and you like the show, hit the like button. Do it, please. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Both of those things make sure that this video can go out and get recommended. It's not getting recommended by YouTube, so every little bit helps. Hit that like button, hit subscribe. Let's talk to our next caller. Connor in Texas. Connor, you're live.
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
Doing well. How about you?
Pretty good. Not much going on.
That's good. You know what? For a Sunday, I appreciate that. It says that you wanted to talk about the Socratic method.
Yeah, well, since you're way more familiar with it and I have like a superficial level understanding of it, I'm just curious if there are what would you say are any limitations or shortcomings to using the Socratic method?
It's a tool, really. I mean, and in the same way that I would point at a hammer, and go, what are the limitations of a hammer? It won't screw a nail into wood. A hammer is a really bad screwdriver. I don't know, a vice grip is really, really bad at chopping wood. And so you need to use that tool in the context that it's useful, right? The Socratic method, if you want to boil it down, is that 3-year-old or 2-year-old going, why is that? Why is that, right? You break it down every little bit and it helps you challenge your assumptions. And if you are really using that methodology, you can find where the holes in your reasoning are. And it's really useful. I feel like the end result of Socratic reasoning is I don't know. If we do it enough, the answer is I don't freaking know. And it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. It's supposed to make you want to explore those I don't knows and find better reasonings, or, maybe change your opinion if it doesn't have good reasoning behind it. The Socratic method is not useful in finding, those positive, definitive results, but it's not made to do that. It's made to help you break things down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that whole just ask why was my only superficial level understanding of what is explained in, like, if there's ever something about it on TV or in movies, like, just ask why all the time. It's like, is that really all there is to it?
No, that's not at all there is to it. But what it does is it helps point you in the direction that you need to go down. In school, if you ever took Socratic notes, in the margins, what you're doing is backing up explanations. Why is this the case? Well, this is the case because of X, Y, Z, and it's helping you make sure that you have a good grounding, behind this information. If you heard a claim, let's say that, the walls of Jericho were found at an archaeological site in the Middle East. There's positive evidence of Jericho, which was this, described in the Bible as this huge walled city, in this supernatural event where they blew horns around and marched around the walls. And after 3 days, the walls crumbled down, right? Finding that evidence, right? How would you interact with that? I think the best tool for that is Socratic method. Who is they? Why do they say that? How do you know that it's Jericho? What would it look like? How, if it was Jericho, we did know that it was Jericho, are the walls there? Were the walls as big as it said in the story? Do we know that they came down? Did it all come down at once? All of these questions, right? All these why?
Now you got my mind going down a little what I call a kernel of truth rabbit hole. So I got to get this off of my mind. So funny enough, it seems like it was more of of them coming down was more of a metaphor, or that some scholars would say, as in they used the red rope going into the woman's house in the wall to sneak them in there while everyone was distracted by the parading around the walls, so that they would attack from the inside and open the gates.
So that's a cool story.
That was just something I had to get off of my mind.
No worries. And I've definitely heard different examples of that. The funny thing is it was only ever treated as a true story until Jericho was found. The fact is that Jericho was found, the actual place.
Yeah.
And
I think there are some that say it's on a fault line.
Well, so here's the thing is Jericho was an ancient city, and it had times where it was incredibly populated and times where it kind of died out and became very rural and then came back, right? During the biblical conquest of Canaan, as described in the Old Testament, when Joshua was leading the Israelites against the Canaanites, Jericho was it was between those big populated times. It wasn't a big walled city. It wasn't that until much later. The reason that the writers, of the Old Testament treated it like this big walled city is because eventually it did become that. But it was not that during the time that it supposedly happened.
Well, cities are also like relative at the time. Like a city back then would have been like 10,000 people, what we would call like a small town today.
True, but even then, it's being described as a factual event that happened, you know, and it's being treated as a factual event because it was used to justify genocide.
Right.
So I think that, it's either way, though. I know we're kind of getting off topic. The Socratic method is how we go, okay, why? How do you know that? That leads us to go, okay, we should probably be looking at archaeology. Who's the archaeologist who found this? How much has been done since then? What have we learned specifically? What conclusions can we come to based on the evidence that we have so far? What evidence do we still need in order to, believe the story that's told in the Bible? What should we look for in order to prove or disprove it? The Socratic method is going to help us point us in the right direction, but then we need to use other tools after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that help?
I'm sorry. Well, actually, you got me going down an archaeology rabbit hole. Because now I'm thinking about how the guy who discovered the lost city of Troy just by using the Iliad description of it.
Isn't that wild? I mean, but what a great example, right? Troy was a place that existed. Yes. Is Troy's existence evidence of a Cyclops, of a Minotaur, of the Isle of Lesbos, of people being turned into animals?
That actually existed.
There's not in the way that it's described by the Greeks. No.
Okay.
But there is a kernel of truth, right? And looking at those kernels of truth, we can go, okay, hey, what can we take from that? Cool. But it's not it doesn't mean that dragons exist, right? Right. And we use that Socratic reasoning to go from there. But Connor, I hope this helped with that whole the tool of Socratic reasoning.
Well, it was just a curiosity on my part. I've never really delved into into any of that. Well,
it sounds like you have. It sounds like you have a lot. It's just maybe putting it in a more rigid understanding.
The Socratic method, I never really studied anything about it. Nothing like really did a deep dive into it.
But you're still,
like I said, my superficial understanding was that he would always ask people why.
Socrates, absolutely, and really it was a lot of it was political. The politics at the time were kind of wild and people were set in their ways. There were a lot of governmental things that were done by tradition instead of for good reason. And so that's kind of where Socrates really kind of used that and ultimately led to his death. Connor, I really appreciate the question. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. All right. Whew. Let's move on. Let's talk to Kyle in Ohio. We're taking these back to back. Let's do this. Kyle, you are live on the show.
Hey, Eric, how you doing today?
I'm doing really good. I feel like I'm getting some good calls. How about you?
It looks like you're having some great calls. I'm having a pretty good day. I'm definitely feeling better than I was last time I called in, a little more energetic.
I appreciate that. The coffee is starting to kick in for me. I've been drinking all this iced coffee that I made, and now I'm nervous because, like, if I got to go to the restroom, man, I am the host and producer, so like, rolling the dice. Kyle, are you the one who called in last time about
Messianic Judaism?
Messianic Judaism, and that you help people train their dogs, right?
It kind of is training and it is kind of not. It's classical conditioning is more what I use, like the core version of it.
Yeah. It sounds like well, it says here in the notes, dog behavior and psychology are evidence against the Abrahamic God. Kyle, what the hell is this? Hit me. What do you got?
Well, it's a subject, obviously, it's very unique to myself and one that I've used with theists in the past, and it makes them think, at least if they believe in science or psychology at all, which, of course, is a big if. And I wanted to run it by you and see what your opinion was about it. I respect your opinion about it. So, in my opinion, the fact that God of the Bible, the Abrahamic God, uses punishment to try to condition and teach his creation tells me he knows absolutely nothing about the psychology or the brain that he supposedly created. That punishment only teaches that someone is unstable and is retaliatory. It doesn't actually teach what otherwise the agent that is using punishment is trying to teach. It teaches to basically harden minds and hearts and make them go underground and, if anything else, pretend to comply. But try to find the ways around it, where actually teaching uses communication and understanding in a two-way street that literally changes individuals.
You know, it's interesting. You know, most of the examples that we have of God doing that kind of thing is in the Old Testament. And if you were to talk to a rabbi, a lot of rabbis would tell you that this idea of God being this perfect, forever loving, forever forgiving God,
I was a rabbi for a while.
That's just not the case. You know,
not at all.
No, Judaism, you know, does not view God as this perfect embodiment of love. And so, you know, when you're looking at the Old Testament, it's an argument against a God that is omnibenevolent. And so if you're talking to somebody, a Christian who believes that, you know, a God is all loving, then I think that's pretty good evidence. But
that leads me to what I was trained actually in rabbinical studies, and actually it wasn't until about 2,500 years ago that Jews even believed in only one God. They were not monotheistic. So even amongst the more ancient writings, it's still based on Assyrian myth and ancient Canaanite myth, and they were a polytheistic culture. It wasn't until later that tribal wars kind of led to a singular God, and that's actually the reason his name changes multiple times.
Yeah, you have El, right? And you have
there's
you know,
El and multiple others, and Baal and
Baal. Yeah.
Baal.
I'm right there with you. That was a rabbit hole I absolutely loved going down when I learned about it. I think where I'm kind of going with it though is modern, and you know, the last few hundred years. You're right.
Especially the last 500 at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if somebody says that they think God is all loving, and I think that you'd have a case there for sure. You'd have a reason to give them pause, but I would definitely be careful, because not everyone believes that, and obviously you know that. You know?
I actually think this argument works regardless, because it
Really?
has nothing to do with love. If you created something and you engineered it and you intelligently created it, that's the only criteria that is required for this to work. Because if I made a machine to work and I think it works the opposite of the way it does, then I didn't. There's no way I created it, or it was accidental.
So you are. I feel like you're carrying an implicit assumption that God was punishing them in order to change their behavior.
Well, then it would be sadistic.
Agreed. But if
it would be for no other reason. But it says in the Bible that they made him mad, so he hurt them.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to come back to him according to theology that, of course, is adjacent, not necessarily in the Bible.
Yeah, I think that if I were to put on that hat, I would say, okay, then God didn't do it in order to convince or anybody.
That argument would be against your own God then.
Right.
You should hate him.
But you should fear and worship them out of fear of.
But that's the other part of what I'm saying, is that if you want something to obey you, you don't make it afraid, because then it obeys its instincts. It cannot obey you. You destroy its rationality and its figuring. It cannot figure out any instruction or guidance. It cannot really function independently. It cannot have a free will, because it's forced into a state of fear and survival, which is not a natural state, which further proves that God doesn't know how to work with the psychology and mind of his own creation. Fear defeats love and thought. It doesn't create it.
I agree. And in a world that a God existed and that God did the things in the Old Testament, then we would be living in a theological North Korea. And I'm not like I'm right there. You don't need to convince me of that for sure. Okay. That said, the people in North Korea are following what the orders because they know what's going to happen otherwise.
Yeah, because there's more than just fear going on there. There's deep conditioning and like the psychology of a cult, which is still unhealthy and unnatural, and a twisting of nature, not going along with it. Which still, I think if you're a god, you would be able to work with what's there to the positive to make them function better for you, rather than to throw monkey wrenches into and manipulate psychology.
I agree. I just
it's a sign of a stupid petty god.
Capricious, deeply capricious.
Yes, that's a perfect word.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I feel like I'd be remiss not to say that. Doesn't it seem like it just is a much better explanation of people trying to tell the stories of their own people? Like that.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
It just makes so much more sense as a myth. But no, I like that. I do like that. I think that
it's at least enough to get people to think. It's not a hard smack in their face, and since I'm there usually to work with dogs, and if the subject comes up, which rarely does, this is a pretty softball way to approach from my profession that they would expect.
Yeah,
and is softer for them.
I think the only thing I'd advise you about is not to fall into the naturalistic fallacy. You said a couple of times this is not natural, and natural is a really subjective, really loose, flowy term that can be really hard to nail down. And so if you're looking for some really good hard hitting points, the word natural can be a tripping place. So it
has been in the past, and I usually describe it as, well, in other words, the most organic flow, the way that a mind will work at its nominal peak, and that would be the natural form of the mind, where it's at rest, it's able to think, it's able to survive without purely thinking about survival. But I totally agree otherwise.
I am filled with so many questions and doubts about the concept of a nominal mind that
that varies from individual to individual.
Exactly.
Which totally agrees with your subjective point.
Yes. Yeah. So, Kyle, I really enjoy when you call in.
I love calling in too. I just want to be able to, I can't talk about this to anybody else.
No, but you talking about your call last week about growing up in the Messianic Judaism. You better believe after that call, I went upstairs and I was like, V, let me tell you about this call that I had with Kyle. Do you remember this guy? You know, and we had a really great
conversation. A
conversation.
little more about that because I think we kind of got derailed. I have so many subjects to talk about that kind of jumped around. But
yeah, just the only thing is we got to make sure that it's something that we can engage with actively.
Exactly.
Because we always lose viewers when it becomes story time. But if it's something that we can engage with together, we're looking good.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I thought this subject was pretty good.
Absolutely. Kyle, thank you for calling in. I look forward to next time.
Hey, no problem. And I did email you. I'm not sure if I got the email correct.
Oh,
I haven't had a response yet, but I know you're very busy. And sometimes my email gets sent to spam.
Let me see here.
It should be captainspish@gmail.
No, I haven't. Oh my gosh, it did. It got absolutely lost. I apologize. All right, I've got it up. I'm starring it in the email, making sure it doesn't go in. And I'll take a look at that.
That's why I wanted to call to let you know. It might be in spam. I don't know how else to contact you. But anyway, I'm also trying to do the Discord, and I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I'm too old to know how to use it.
So you know what? I would take a look at the live chat. My volunteer moderators are there, and they're really, really good at helping people out with that.
They're great, yes.
I agree. All right, I hope to see you there, Kyle.
All right, thanks a lot, Eric.
See ya.
Have a good Sunday.
You too. All right, let's take one more call because why not? And this is fun. So let's go on. Hey, have you hit that like button yet? Are you up for it? Has this show earned it? If it hasn't, don't hit the like button. But if it has, if you're enjoying the conversation, hit that like button, subscribe, please. Every little bit helps, and I would love to hit 20,000 subscribers. We're at 19,000. We've been floating. I'd love to get to that 20,000 hump. All right, let's talk to Rich in New York. Rich, how are
you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really good. Let me really quickly just get you in the lower third here. In the meantime, what did you want to talk about?
I'm an atheist, and I wanted to talk about a lot of the questions that we go through, especially when it comes to religion and everything. Is, from my perspective, is it more about humanity and maybe our self-preservation, our self-importance, trying to make sense of being a conscious being, and yet accepting that we aren't important outside our own little circle is a hard thing to deal with. So that's why people ask questions like, well, it must have happened for a reason. And, my answer is always because it happened. I think it's that struggle of our importance, even when we talk about things like evolution and everything. And I've made this argument before. Using the term complex is so complex, and I always say, it's complex to us, but it's not complex to nature, because it just happens in nature. And I don't even know if it's just somewhat. It's a concept I try to flesh out with people, and it's hard to, because a lot of people just won't accept the fact that we're not important. I always say that when the guy 2 blocks from me dies, I look at the ambulance leave his house, but I never spoke to him, so he's unimportant to me. Mm-hmm. But yet, when someone else's life is important, so that's just a microcosm of what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It definitely sounds like you've been kind of batting this idea around, and the more you interact with it, the easier it will be to put it to words.
Yeah.
I kind of want to...
Have you ever had...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. You're in New York. I'm in Portland, and you can tell that there's a bit of a delay. So as long as we're both generous with each other, we're good. Before I answer, you wanted to add something.
No, I just wondered if you batted that concept around in your head at all.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then with time, I feel like I had a bit of a perspective shift. And
in what sense?
Sure. So the reason for religion changed for me over time, and the reason for philosophy for me changed over time. When I was a lot younger and I fully believed in a God, and I wanted to know why bad things happen to good people. it was very, very specific, right? God exists. All of these things are real. Heaven is real. Hell is real. Sin is real. But I don't understand why bad things happen to good people, right? It had a very specific purpose and was fitting a very specific need, and everything else was in place. And as I kind of broke things down and shifted and changed and grew, I found that the purpose changed as well. It wasn't about, well, how could God allow this? It's, well, what about God? Maybe there's this kind of, maybe God isn't all loving, or maybe God just doesn't know everything, or isn't all powerful, so isn't able to get everywhere all at once. God's trying his best, or, God is actually just a word that we're using to mean the greater, global unconscious connection that all people have with each other, right? As I kind of broke things down, the meaning of God, the purpose of God, and the purpose of philosophy changed as I was wrestling with those things. I think that you're in a place where you're talking about value and meaning, and I think that's because that's where you're at. But I think that the philosophy that stands out to you and what you focus on is going to change depending on where you are in your life. And so while I think that the purpose of philosophy is that for you, I want to say that it changes for everybody. So I wouldn't necessarily categorize all philosophy there, but just use that as a lens to understand where you're at.
Right. And a lot of people think I'm heading toward a nihilistic point of view. I don't know if it's nihilistic. I mean, I understand the importance of me.
Yeah.
I understand the importance of my children. I understand even the importance of you in the context of this conversation and what you lend to my life. But I also understand the context of something happening to someone literally, like I say, 3 blocks from me that I think has no consequence to me. So I think it's not nihilistic to be aware of both places.
I think that people treat nihilism as some verboten evil, or scary thing.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a couple of places in philosophy that can help. If you haven't looked at Immanuel Kant, what Kant talks about kind of helps set the stage for a lot of things, right? He talked about this great imperative that all people have, that is essentially don't do a thing if you don't want the whole world to do it, right? The categorical imperative. Kant also said that you treat people as means and not ends, right? Or you treat people as ends unto themselves, right? You don't use people. You treat people as their own thinking agents, and that stuff was really, really useful. So check out Kant. I disagreed with Kant eventually, but it was a good framework to go from. After that, I think that if you want to explore nihilism, I've always pushed towards Camus, but I think a more approachable person nowadays is Sartre. I've been recommending a book called At the Existentialist Cafe, and that might be worth a read. It's actually a pretty entertaining and fun one, and I know it's available on audiobook as well.
Yeah, I've read some of Kant's stuff, and I've come to the place where you're at. I'm not. In the end, I don't agree with him. I think some of his ideas are good, but in the end, I'm not of that camp. I've heard of that the last book that you talked about, but I've never read it. I've heard about it though.
It's definitely worth it, and it's not a long one. Like I think if you are doing yard work and you pop in a earbud and listen to the audiobook, you'll probably get through it by the time you're finished, doing laundry or whatever after a weekend or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely. I hope that this kind of helped ground that you're at a very specific place, and yeah, just off of your example, like what you said says a lot about you and where you're at, and I think that's really neat. And I wish you the best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care, Rich.
Yep.
I might have been a little too verbose there. I apologize. The cat is distracting me. Mwah! I'm going to use the cat as my excuse. I think it's time for me to read some super chats. As always, at the end of every episode, I do read super chats, and every bit is extremely appreciated. So thank you for that. Coach Frankie sent $20, and I've always tried to stay away from the dollar amount. That way, it didn't make people feel weird if they only threw a couple of bucks in. But let me try it. I'll try reading the amounts and see if that changes things. Let me know in the comments what you prefer. But Coach Frankie sent $20 and said, "Hey Eric, big fan of your debate style. Are you still doing them? Hope you and V are doing well." It's been quite a while since I've done a debate. My perspective on debates has shifted over time after I've done enough of them. It really is a performance, and I've gotten rusty. I think that I would need to really practice before I was comfortable doing like a big formal debate again. I think it's fun. I think they can be really entertaining. And I'm not against it. I just would need to prepare. That's all. But yeah, V and I are doing really, really well. Thank you for asking. Sean sent £10. Thank you, Sean. The go-to text for infinite numbers is The Higher Infinite by Kanamori, but it's difficult. See also Hypothesis. Is there more text in here? Yeah. See also the continuum hypothesis. You'll question reality. Different axioms lead to different sizes. Interesting. All right. Anybody who wants to go down that rabbit hole, thank you for the suggestions. And then John Klein sent $10. Thank you, John. Says 4K looks great. I appreciate it. I think it looks great too. Now let's get that other mic. I appreciate that. I did add the mic to the Amazon wish list finally. So if I have the Amazon wish list link in the description, you should be able to see it there. But hopefully, we'll get there eventually. It's just going to take some time. Thank you so much for that. If you do like the show and you want to support it, every little bit helps. I'm still at a place where I'm footing the expenses for the show out of pocket, and I'd love to get to a place where I'm not. But I think it's worth it. So I'm going to keep doing it in the meantime. But if you do want to support the show, and you can, consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I do also want to announce that I am streaming on Twitch, and I'm considering actually streaming out the way I do edits and everything to this show. I think it'd be fun, with other people, getting to hang out and put out clips and, get more of that stuff moving for this show, and maybe help you if you're interested in doing your own show, see how it gets done. I'm Eric the Heathen, I believe, on Twitch. But yeah, I'm going to hop over to the Discord. I would love to do an after show, hang out with people for a little bit. Thank you all so much for joining me. Remember, next week, I am out. I am not going to be doing a show next week. I'll be back the week after. So I hope you have a wonderful 2 weeks. I will see you later. Have a wonderful time. Thank you for joining me. I'm Eric Murphy, and I'm glad we had this talk.